Good evening and welcome to this very special episode of the Breakfast Show After Dark. This is, in fact, the first show of its kind. We've never done one of these quite like this before. We have had guests before, obviously, but we've never had an actual panel that really changes things up a bit. Now, if you join us tonight expecting fancy pyrotechnics and graphics and whiz bangs, then I'm afraid you're going to be bitterly disappointed because the subject matter for tonight's show is far too serious for that kind of thing. And besides, I realise that your evenings are incredibly precious. So I'm not even going to bother to introduce our guests on our panel tonight. We can do that as we go along. Instead, I'm going to cut straight to the chase. I'm going to bring in all of the people that are in the show at the moment. You can see them there now. And I'm going to start with a question for you, Andy. There is a saying. I've checked. There is a saying. You can't manage what you can't measure. We hear lots of figures bandied about the rate of suicide within the UK construction industry. But as far as I can tell, there is actually no accurate measure of just how acute the problem actually is. Is that right?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think it is because a lot of us have spoken about this before. If you work in construction, then you lose your job and a month later you can't pay your bills, everything gets on top of you. That's technically not a suicide in construction. To put a measure on this, look, we've all spoken about it. We think it's probably at least double what the ONS figures are. Either way, any more than zero is too many. I think the big thing to look at, and I'm sure we'll go into it in more detail, is these numbers are going up every year at quite an alarming rate. So whatever's in place at present is not working. Simple as that. And I think we do need, as I'm sure we'll all agree, we need to be more proactive and preventative. There's no point in waiting until someone's at crisis, because having been there myself, no matter what you threw at me or told me to do, I wasn't going to listen. So I think we just need to look at what's in place because it ain't working.
Who does that rest with? And just while you're doing that, I'm going to bring in Ben Wade. Good evening, Ben. Who does that rest with? Are we looking for legislation? Are we looking for the construction leaders to actually take the bull by the horns? Who is responsible for changing the current situation?
Well, unfortunately, it's rather than being top down, it's bottom up. You've got people such as Steve, who's obviously set up and running construction sport. He'll be speaking in a minute. There's many other charities that are doing fantastic work. But in my opinion, we need to have some sort of panel / alliance / group centrally funded by government. And in that panel needs to be someone from each sector of the industry. It's pointless having 12 mental health first aid people that have done a 2-day course or some government individual that's so detached from reality. We need something like a building inspector. We need an apprentice. We need a ground worker that's 35 years experience. We need a digger driver. We need all these different types of people centrally funded. And Steve is going to jump on, I know he is, when I mention one little word, RIDDOR.
It's like you've read my mind. I'm going to put a few more people on the stream here. Let's put Steve back. Let's put Ed in as well. I think Ben has just vanished for some reason. You've just mentioned the word RIDDOR, and that was actually my next question. I was reading one of your LinkedIn posts just yesterday, and this is what it said. The construction industry openly admits that long hours, transient working conditions, job security, job pressure, and uncertainty around pay are all key factors for the mental health issues in the sector. Why is it acceptable that suicide is not deemed to be reportable under RIDDOR? So, Steve, let's throw it over to you. And if I can get you to turn off your speaker or something, that would be helpful because we can all hear it. So, over to you, Steve. Can you hear us, Steve?
Sorry, I can't quite hear that. Yeah, I can hear you. You got me?
Yeah, I've got you back again. Yeah, we're talking about why isn't suicide under RIDDOR?
Yeah, interesting one. I wrote to the HSE 6 weeks back and said to them pretty much a little bit off my chest, shall we say, and I'm quite openly, quite happy published the letter I wrote to them. There's no hiding back on that. But one thing at the end of it, where they come back to me, was with regards to Riddle, it's not really an issue for them to worry about, purely because in terms of a Riddle, it is a personal issue that someone would carry out suicide. And I didn't actually flag up at first until annoyingly on a Sunday morning about 5 o'clock when I woke up to get a glass of water. Then I thought, why is it not a riddle? I was like thinking, and then from then I just got into it. So I started studying a bit just through the likes of Google. Google searched it, and there's been a lot of studies by some very, very clever people, professors in multiple universities across the world. Japan now do it, USA now do it, and France now do it, where suicide in the workplace is investigated. I'm not saying in a riddle, specific way, in different countries, everyone has their own ways, but they just flagged that to me. Why is it not? So if somebody's doing this, so the HSE come back and said it's a personal issue, but the last 6 years of marketing that I've seen in terms of mental health and construction, everything about that is transient working, long hours, no security of pay, no security of employment. There's all these different factors that the industry and the HSE are even pushing in their own campaigns to say these are what's the effects of mental health issues. But as soon as someone crosses that line and makes a decision they can't reverse, then suddenly now it's just a personal issue. I don't look at things from a corporate world. I don't look at it from a legal point of view. I just look at it purely from my morals, really. And to me, 507 people who recently killed themselves in 2021, that's 507 investigations where we could have learned something. There was a big backlash, not a big backlash, it was a lot more positive, especially through the inbox on Friday night. But multiple people said, no, it isn't because of this and because of that. You can't investigate it because of this and because of that. But I'm not saying you've got to investigate in a way to prosecute the employer. I'm saying let's just have a number of key questions and routes that we look down, one from an HSE perspective, or two as just an employer, that were there factors in the workplace or in the environment or in the industry that could have played a part in why this guy's not here anymore. So I won't be shifted from the point of view that I definitely think it is a riddle. And I'm just a ground worker at heart, I always say, but there's a lot of people out there, very, very clever people in very, very prominent positions that have argued this, and all they've got back from the HSE is pretty much, and these letters and responses have been aired online. We'll be carrying out the next few weeks of just dropping this stuff out there so people can see. But why is it not a riddle? It's fouled opportunities to investigate and understand the reason why someone's killed himself, if you look at me. And I always go back to the NFL and the RFU. The RFU are fighting a battle at the moment in terms of not looking after people due to concussions with the rugby union over the years. The NFL were famously fined, I think, $165 million for not looking after people with concussions because they were negligent and not looking after the people that worked within their organisation. Now, we've known this issue's been going on since, I think, the first reports that come out when I started studying it, probably 2016, was research from 2010 to 2011 to 2015 was 400. And there were also what the numbers were. It was working out a lot anyway, but we knew this in 2011. So why have we not made significant change, or why has anything from a legal perspective been put on the employer to do stuff? I don't want to see companies sued. I don't want to see companies being held up in court and done with it. But I, as a business owner myself with my own team, if one of my own team went and killed himself, I want to know if I played a part. Was there something that I done wrong? Consciously, I wouldn't sleep right at night. So I'd want to find out, and I won't find out unless someone investigates it. And then once something gets investigated and found out, I can then make changes that I might not have been aware of, because none of us are really educated in the world of suicide and mental health to the point of view that we can make a change. And yeah, it's been unbelievable, actually, the response from it. Annoyingly, the world of LinkedIn, I suppose, is one of these, all the people that agree with me a lot of time come through the personal inbox and not publicly. And then all the person who disagree love to air their stuff out in the comments. But there's been a lot of good responses in that as well. But it's just about being accountable. I always look at who has been accountable for this over the last 5 or 6 years, who's been running this show, who's been running the campaigns that are out there. The campaigns, all they've changed is the title on them. It's just another way to raise a bit more money at the end of the year or throughout the year, week in, week out. And the money's, the people on the ground don't see it. The studies have come out last year. The people on the ground aren't actually experiencing the difference that should be being made. We are, as a person.
I'll come back to that one in just a second, if I may.
Yeah.
But one of the defences I've heard about the riddle thing is we don't need to investigate it because it doesn't actually take place on site. That is not always the case. I mean, I'm remember speaking to you, Steve, where somebody had actually killed themselves on site. They'd gone to work that day and they had taken their own life on site. Surely something like that should trigger a riddle, shouldn't it?
On site or off site, it is not a riddle. This is the bonkers thing. Now, we've seen it on site. Mace had a guy last year took his own life on site. The year before that, they had another guy take his own life. There's multiple. With the guys who were in the documentary that we done, they witnessed one on site with a forklift driver off the scaffolding. Just literally couldn't do it. It gets directly passed over to the coroner. And if the coroner thinks there might have been a reason why the workers paid to that, they will refer it back. But I've not heard anything like that before, but it's not investigated. So it's just, how can we go round this industry saying we need funding, we need support? I've been to Parliament and he was kind enough to invite me along. We went up there, and the only thing, I've got invited into a few actual political parties to have conversations about where to go next in terms of Parliament. I don't want to be in there. I don't think we need funding for this. I honestly don't. I think there's enough money in this industry to support us already. And if we repair the industry with the problems that we have, they reckon this is a multi-billion-pound situation we're in here. So every bit of good work we do, surely we'll save a bit of money and we can spend it on ourselves. But I don't think this is about money at all. I honestly think this is about morals. And unfortunately, the people who don't agree with me think otherwise.
I'm going to bring in a couple of points from the chat very quickly. Gary Muirhead has just said the biggest asset to its company is its workforce. Without them, the company may as well be dead in the water. But I think this is the most appropriate one. Gary also says, I had a very good friend of mine who took his own life, and it was the last person on earth I would have thought of. And I keep questioning myself, why didn't I see the signs? How could I have stopped it? My former business partner took his own life 10 years ago now, or thereabouts. So I know exactly how you feel, Gary.
With the mental health, a lot of people that have had that experience of being like really low, wanting to take their own life, there's so many people that haven't experienced that. So when you go on a site, you go a lot of people and they're like, oh, man up, oh, it'll be all right, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, oh, get a grip. You don't know until it actually happens to you. And that's quite a big thing in construction. You could go on a site and there could be maybe one person or maybe two or how many ever. But if you went on a site and there's one person that's had that experience and or is feeling very down and wanting to take their own life, who does he go and speak to without getting slagged off? Yeah, there's a lot of places you can go on site and you've got friends, close buddies that you speak to without work, and you can go and speak to them. But there's a lot of places like your agency drivers and agency workers go on a site, they don't know anyone. Who do they speak to without getting slagged off? And that's the big thing. We should all be looking after each other. When you're just so scared to go and say anything because you know what the talk at the tea time or lunchtime, you know what the talk's going to be. It's
while you were saying that, Steve, I could actually see Andy nodding away in the background. I mean, basically, that's part of your job now, Andy, isn't it? Going out on site, and you are that person that people speak to, and yourself, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's a strange one because having been there, 3.5 years ago now, everything just became too much, and I attempted my own life. It was the strangest situation, waking up without family or anything to support you, and it was kind of I think it was Gary Muirhead or Muirfield. Apologies if I got his name wrong. Said I didn't notice these signs. How can I have missed them? Well, the reality. Here we go. Thank you. Keep questioning myself. Why didn't I see the signs? How could I have stopped it? The bottom line is you probably won't see the signs in everybody. Now, in my situation, I became a complete recluse. I didn't go to work because I couldn't work. Even simple things like making a cup of tea, getting out of bed in the morning, preparing food was impossible. I just couldn't do it. Whereas other people will go to work and sometimes they're the opposite. So if they're quiet, for example, they might be the funny guy or girl playing jokes, winding up his work colleagues or whatever. You cannot answer that question. What should I look out for? Because we're all different. We'll base all of our thoughts and the way we act on so many different experiences, etc. So there isn't a pinpoint thing. I would only say if there are tiny little changes in that person, and if they do the opposite perhaps of what they normally do. So as I mentioned, if they're quiet and suddenly they're quite funny and loud and outward spoken, or if they're very well dressed, for example, and suddenly they just look a bit, disheveled and they're not shaving or washing, little things, but we need to be proactive and preventative. So as we've just been discussing then, when someone gets to that stage, rather than thinking, I don't want to go and see the site manager because he's just going to tell me to get on my toes, I'm not going to get paid, and I'm out the door, he'll get someone else in because I'm seen as a weakness and he won't get his big bonus at the end of the job. That person needs to be in a position to be comfortable enough to know where to go and who to speak to at the outset. And that's if they might just feel a bit down, if they're sleeping a bit too much, if they're agitated all the time. Little symptoms being addressed then is so much easier than a guy that's swinging from the scaffolding or someone's taking their own life. That is too late. That's too critical for anyone to deal with. And I think, I really feel for you, Gary, saying, don't blame yourself, because nobody in this world would better recognize everybody's signs and symptoms because we are so different. But I think
that's the thing. That's like you're saying, Andy. It only takes you to notice a difference. I personally feel that if I see someone, if I'm in the machine and it's like you say, someone's loud or someone's different and someone's changed, all it takes is you to just stop for 2 seconds and go, "Are you all right?" And they'll probably 90% of the time they'll go, "Yeah, I'm fine." But that there, you asking, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And he'll go, "Yes, everything's fine." Like most of the time they do. But that opens that door slightly more that he might feel that, fuck, I can go and speak to him. I can maybe go and approach. And then maybe half an hour later, he might come up to you and go, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit crap," or, "Oh, I've got this to sort out. I'm just feeling a bit down." All it takes is for someone just to go, "Are you all right? Is everything all right at home? You seem different today." And then that opens a gate for them to come to you. And I think there should be more of that on site.
I think the big thing with that as well is we are so million miles an hour as tradespeople. You think, when you start work in the morning, if you get there 7:30, kettle's on, "Hello mate, how you doing? Good weekend? Yeah, break, bang." You've actually asked a question how someone's doing, but you never really listen. I think going back and asking again, if you notice, as you just said then, notice a little difference, and actually you're right, mate. And then the key thing for me, following on from that, when you've asked for the second or maybe third time later on in the day, is people go, "Oh, but I'm not qualified, I'm not trained, I'm not experienced to answer their questions." Listen, when I was at breaking point and I phoned an old rugby mate of mine, I didn't want him to say a word. And this is what people don't get. When you are, and mental health's like an addiction, I've said it all along, until you admit you've got a problem, you want to get help, no matter what somebody says, you won't do anything. But eventually, when you are ready to talk, I didn't want him go and see a doctor, go and see a psychologist, go and see a counsellor, take these pills. I just wanted someone to listen to me to go, blah, and get it out my system. And that's the first step. Don't worry about being qualified and what do I say? Someone's struggling, they just want to talk and get stuff off their chest. And that's the first step forward.
It's interesting, a point that's come out there, because Dan Cullen in the chat, good evening, Dan. What I see so many times, no one asks how you are this morning, or is everything okay? Where I had proper chats with guys struggling with bills and home issues. Going back to what you just said there, Steve, Andy, we are always at a million miles an hour, aren't we? You arrive and you get cracking. And, that whole idea of sitting around having a cup of tea together, by and large, that's gone by the ball, doesn't it? Because everyone's always on the hurry up now.
Yeah, listen, we all know that we're understaffed on site work or even small residential work. We've got to change the working conditions. We've got to have proper breaks. And one thing us men are crap at, and that's talking. The reason we've got so many, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, and I said, the reason suicide's so high in construction, because sadly we're very male dominated. And I believe if there were more women on site, in the canteen, whatever at work, they would probably talk to us more and enable us to talk more. But because we're very male biased, blokes are pretty crap at talking, we're way understaffed, and generally working conditions from building an extension all the way through to a massive block of flats or school, we've got to actually prepare, be proactive, look at, you go and sit down for an hour at lunchtime. Doesn't matter if you want to go and sit on a bit of grass and have a sandwich and watch videos on your phone. If you want to go to the canteen and eat, go for a walk. But, I reckon I worked out about 4,500 trades up and down the country the last 18 months. And every single site, I asked them, listen, if you could change one thing, what's your big problem? They all went and pointed at the site boss. Mm-hmm. And do you know what? For him or her to change costs nothing. As you said, Steve, we don't need billions. We don't need loads of money and bottomless pots of cash to be launched at everybody. If that person at the top can actually start being polite, nice, and actually knowing their staff's name rather than a payroll number and maintaining a relationship with them and actually looking after them, we're halfway there. One site I went to, 540 something people working there. The site director was a vile individual. And I said, just out of interest, what do you do for all your crew's mental health? And he went, I'm brilliant. Look, you see, I put that Christmas tree up for them. I mean, and he was the one that sacked 11 decorators on the spot because their chin strap was undone in the middle of the summer while having a fag on the ground. No pay, out the door, do one, I'll get another crew in. We've got to change the way we work. And the fact that we're not governed, we're not regulated, there's a lot of changes needed. But unfortunately, it's people like us. It's not coming from the powers that be.
It's the people that haven't experienced it. Won't you go into site and you see leaflets up on the wall, and you'll get emails from your work saying about awareness and all that, but everyone that haven't experienced that, they don't take any notice of it. It's just like, it's just another billboard, or it's just another email, crap. And I've heard people getting the email and going, it's just shite, and they'll flick by it. But until it happens to you, then you get the emails, then you see the pamphlets. But you're still like, what's that doing for me? That's not doing anything. You get the emails, you get the things on social media saying, we're supporting mental health and this and that. But nothing happens after it. Nothing. And I would love to be a mental awareness person, first aider on site, because I'm on a machine. I'm working with, sometimes I could be working with different guys every week. And I'm seeing a variety of people, whereas like your site supervisor, your site agents and stuff, they'll maybe get, we're going to train you up to be a mental awareness first aider. But they're never really working with the guys all the time. They'll maybe come over and go, they look fine, and then they go away again. They need someone that's working with the guys, that's working with a variety of guys to pinpoint, right, he's not right. Right, how do I approach it? But do you need training for it? That if someone's not had that experience, what training do you give them? Because I find that the people that have had experienced it and been in a really bad place, I was in a really bad place. A lot of people would probably look at me and go, oh God, he's got it made for him. He's got a great life. But I was in a bad way probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And would I need training? Or do I just go off how I feel, that how to approach people? Like a lot of people will go, I'm going to go to the doctors, but I think the doctors is a complete waste of time, because they put you on tablets. The tablets make you worse. So what is the point of that? And it's not just worse just for a couple of weeks. It's months it makes you worse. And then you start to get better, and you're just like, why would they give you a tablet that you're nearly feeling suicidal, you're feeling really down? Here's a tablet. It'll make you worse for a couple of months, but you'll be fine after it. That's not how it works.
But it goes back to the point that you were making about putting signs up. It's the same as you go onto a site and there's warning signs about slips and trips. putting a sign up doesn't mean that somebody's not going to fall down a mountain. That
Yeah.
doesn't cure the problem. It doesn't take it away. It just means that somebody's ticked a box. Before we came on air, literally 2-3 minutes before we came on air, I was speaking to Steve, because we've just had some news come through from Construction News and a couple of other publications that construction now tops the league for insolvencies. In the first quarter of this year, we've lost 4,165 construction companies. Bearing in mind all the background that goes with all of this, we know that, fear over job security and financial security is a big deal. Gary Muirhead has asked another question there. Do you think things have got drastically worse since the cost of living crisis? Personally, my feeling was that we were going to come out of COVID and really feel the effects. We've gone straight out of COVID into a cost of living crisis. We're to my mind, we're sitting on a ticking time bomb here, aren't we?
I think we are. Sorry, just to quickly answer the insolvencies. I don't think Steve even knows this. I speak to him most days. My building company, which has won loads of awards, got a great reputation, as of today, I had to put it into voluntary liquidation because, well, the reason for me was obviously COVID hit, but the reality was with complex PTSD, you're in fight or flight. And I struggled dealing with clients that, had an unforeseen on the job. Dealing with them, I found very tough. But also, when you look at, you didn't work for a bit, what training have we had as business owners, how to run a business, how to do your accounts, your marketing, your tax, how to do pension, health and safety, holiday, sick allowance? We've not had that training. A lot of us came straight out of school. I don't think Steve did either. We didn't go to university or college or any of that. And we kind of learned on the job, which I still think is a brilliant way of learning a trade. But when you become self-employed, I think it's 92% of people in construction at some stage will try to be self-employed. It works for some, not others. But the reality is we need that training as part of an apprenticeship or early stages. If you do want to run your own business, this is how you do the basics. Because when things get tough, COVID, cost of living crisis, material price rises, van and tool theft, cost of materials going up, how do we manage it? We don't.
So we've had that conversation quite a few times before, and you literally have that as a 16, when I was 16, when I got registered CIS, I think it was, and you are a one-man business owner. A self-employed man is a one-man business owner. You've got to find an accountant. You've got to start collecting your receipts. You've got to put this in. You've got to do that. You've got a lot. Sometimes obviously putting your invoices and stuff. It's different, slightly different, but you don't get trained for that. You learn on the job. And I think the country and the world in a way needs to realise that when the world like COVID comes or crises happen and everything goes Pete Tong, construction just keeps on motoring through. We are the people that can. I know it was a very bad place for a lot of people, and I fully appreciate there was a tough time through COVID, but to me, it was absolute make hay while the sun shine. I was working on the roads, the highway jobs. We had multiple closures going on at one time. We had more work than I could have ever asked for. There was little patches where we were a bit dry, but it's the best industry in the world for it. It was like, where else would you want to be? I met people from the 2008 kind of crisis that happened then, who are ex-bankers with six-figure sums, who are now quite happy to be construction workers because they just love the quality of life it gives people. And I think when we actually realise, if we really invest and support the people in this industry, we are the best. I'll stand by. I think we're the industry which made up of the best people in the world, without a shadow of a doubt.
Right, guys, I'm going to interrupt you very quickly. Tonight's show has been widely promoted by our friends over at Plantworx. I do need to give them a very quick plug, and then we'll come back because we've got loads of people in the chat there that want to ask some questions. Let me see. Yes. Plantworx, 34 days away. They are supporting tonight's show and have been busily promoting this show all day long. So for the uninitiated, here's a very quick look at what Plantworx is all about. Yeah, and if
Thought-
hundreds of diggers all
Thought I'd
gathered in
change
one
my
place,
hat.
well done, that man. If hundreds of diggers all gathered in one place is not enough to make you pre-register for the show, then perhaps this might. Plantworx, I only found this out today. Plantworx is offering 5 lucky visitors a chance to win one of 5 £150 chip and pin gift cards or one of 3 pairs of tickets to their Innovation Awards. Everyone registers as a visitor to Plantworx 2023 before midnight on Friday will be automatically entered. Winners will be randomly selected and connected via email. So to be in with a chance, you need to have pre-registered for your free entry badge by 23:59. That's 1 minute to 12 on Friday the 12th of May, just 2 days' time. You can register at app.plantworx.co.uk. Easier still, go over into the chat. Now, speaking of the chat, we've had lots and lots of comments here. This one really did catch my eye. It's Gary Muirhead again. Perhaps we should be educating the new site foremen and agents that shouting and bawling attitude doesn't work anymore, and you'll get less out of your man, not more. I can attest to this. I was lucky enough, if lucky is the right word. Back to back, I worked on 2 different magazines with 2 different editors. The first was he was like the model that they built Gordon Ramsay on. He shouted and he swore and he threw things at everyone. 5 o'clock, my coat was on and I was out the door. The next guy was nice, you know. Every once in a while he'd buy you a pint at lunchtime, whatever it might be. I'd have walked over hot coals for the guy. That's the difference. And you know, I do think we are. I'd like to think we're living in more enlightened times, and maybe that shouting and bawling attitude does need to go. My problem with that, and I agree wholeheartedly with Gary, is the fact that it's kind of a ricochet effect or a domino effect. You've got a client at the top who is berating the main contractor's berating the subby's berating, and so it goes down. And who does it all land with? The workers on site, who are getting in the neck because they're running late or whatever it might be. How do you overcome that?
And on that, I think is that pressure being pushed down the chain. I've always felt the person who's willing to stand up and put their foot up and go, no, this isn't acceptable, it stops rolling downhill then. I was a foreman for multiple years across a number of big projects. And when you stand up for the people who work under you and you go back to it, you earn all the respect from the people who you're overseeing. And then you suddenly become a lot stronger. And I think that's probably why we do what we do now, really, is about ricocheting back up and going, you push and push and push. But when things go wrong, it still comes back on us for doing something wrong. You can't have both. You can't push and push and push and then also massively complain when injuries or accidents or fatalities happen on site. The two just don't go together. So there's an element, I think, there's a big part of it with clients and I suppose main contractors where there is such competition to win these projects. It is just pressure. But the buck's got to stop somewhere down that chain of people literally just accepting to pass that pressure down. I always think if you're willing to pass pressure down like that onto people, then you've got a real hard look at yourself. We work, and I have done. I like to think it's one of our stronger points, really, that we've got a good core of people behind us who support us, and a lot of people that fight our corner a lot of times purely because I've worked with them in the past and they know what it's all about. But don't push that shit downhill, basically. That's the thing, and that's what you see on sites. And I think a lot of it is the old school way. And the old school way's brilliant. I appreciate it a lot. When someone really barks at me, but then the guys on site bark back as well, I love it in a way. That bit of conflict is kind of, you notice when you find people that actually care, when people do it, and they care for the job as well, they care for the industry. And I think if anyone is worth their salt, they'll stand up for themselves and literally go, no, I'm not having that. And that's probably my group of mates from construction are all people that on my first intro to them, we were all punching each other, I think. So it's kind of, we all do. You all stand up for things that you think what are right, and then you realise, oh, I like that in someone. Let's go for a beer. But yeah, and seeing it in people as well, and seeing other companies work like it. We're all working on multiple projects where there's multiple trades, multiple businesses operating. But don't let it go past you. If you see something you don't think's right morally, don't just ignore it and crack on. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for the person who's getting it in the ear. And that's, I think, is ultimately where this mental health and construction thing comes. If you stand up for what you think's right, things will change. I think we've got.
There needs to be more, like a lot of companies will have site meetings, and it's like your manager, maybe a director or the site agent all in an office, and they speak about what's getting done. Oh, this will get done. This will get done. Oh, we're needing this done. How long do you think that's going to take? Oh, it'll take a day. go out and speak to the actual workers, not people sitting in a bloody office going, oh, this will take one day. There's times that I've been told, right, I've got a day to do this, and I'm like, who's telling them this is going to take a day? They need to have the directors come up to people on site and go, right, anything that needs to be changed here, do you think you'll get that done in a day? I've been told that you can get that done in a day, but I've actually come up and seen you, and I realise that no way that's going to get done in a day. There needs to be more interacting with the high lads, the high up guys, to the actual workers on the site. Don't just come into a site, go into an office, chat, and then bugger off again. Actually go out and see the workers, chat with them, ask how they are, and then you'll understand how things are going to get done. Okay, this is going to take a week, not a day. And that's why a lot of pressure is happening, because people in our office with some big companies and small companies are going, oh, yeah, are just saying what the client wants to hear. And that needs to stop, because the client's going, oh, yes, this is getting get done this week. But the guy that's actually doing the work on a machine or on the ground, they're stressed out. They're pushing, and they're like, oh, this needs to be done. And you're like, how's this possible? I've got no men with me. I'm by myself with one guy. You take that guy away to go and do something else, then I'm left, and it's just it's all mismatched. It's all wrong, I think.
I certainly see that from the demolition arena. I mean, one of the things I always hear in demolition is, somebody bids for a job and they're told they've got the job, but they haven't got a start date. And then they get a phone call on a Wednesday afternoon to say you start on Monday. And that job that you allocated 4 weeks to do, we need you to do it in 2 weeks because the piling contractor's coming in right behind you. Well, says who? That's a problem we've created for ourselves, isn't it?
I've heard it multiple sites. We go across many projects, and the amount that I hear of start dates been moved, pushed, but the final date never changes. It never goes anywhere, and this program, like you're saying, who is building these programs? Like I say, it's people who aren't operating in these environments. You've got to incorporate the workforce into programs, and I believe to understand what can be done properly. There's a lot of specialists, but people driving these machines, operating the machinery, what doing these jobs, they're specialist people. They're not just numbers. Engage, and they're a lot clever. I noticed that with me because I was quite young when I started as a foreman, because I couldn't work on the tools because I was injured at the time. So I had to look after people who knew a lot more than me. I don't try and sound smarter than them because I don't know enough. So I used to drag them to meetings for me and go, can you just talk about what we spoke about out there?
And like you're saying about the machines, I operate a machine. I do a lot of GPS, so I do a lot of like suds basins and shaping and this and that, and then for roads and stuff like that. So I've got to make sure like this is right. I've got to calculate some stuff and then make sure it's right, because I know after I'm finished, the engineer comes around and services it all, and that's a stress on me. And if I've been pushed, right, this needs done. And you kind of think, oh, it's not right here. You're thinking in the back of your mind, oh, God, the engineer's coming out tomorrow. Is he going to survey it? And then this is going to be wrong and that's going to be wrong. And that's the constant, like, everyday thing that I go through. But because I know how to handle my mental health, and I've got lots of friends and stuff like that I speak to, like Ed Butler, I speak to him like every day. I can't get off the phone to him sometimes, but I speak to him a good few times a day, and that takes my mind off everything, and that just makes me mellow out and gets on going. So having that one guy you can speak to, but then after you go home, you go and do your stuff with your family, and then you go to your bed and then you wake up and it all starts over again. You're like, God, is this going to be right? Is this going to be done right? I've only got a day to do this. I've only got a couple hours to do this. It's just constant all the time. And probably in most construction sites, it's probably like that all the time.
Yeah. Well, Danny Kearney, my mate Danny, evening Danny rather, I agree with Steve. This has to be paid for by the industry. We need a fair trade standard for a house building. Fair homes as an example. Basically, shareholders are pushing the budgets. They're pushing the timelines as well. Nick Drew has just joined us as well. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Yes, if a flat, there's a clarification here. If a flat costs 300k now, Is that the true cost of people are having to work their knackers off, or should it be 400,000 so people get more time at home and better conditions? I'm certainly not advocating that we drive up the cost of housing, particularly at the present time, but that's the knock-on effect, isn't it? And if it does take a week or it takes 2 weeks, that's how long it takes, surely.
I think the big problem as well is I'm getting a bit sick and tired of seeing all this stuff in the media, mainly print, saying, oh, look at these builders, tradespeople finishing all these houses, these new builds in such a shoddy way. They have no idea. Typical shit journalism. If they looked into it, they would realise it's not the ability of these tradesmen and women. It's they're being told to finish it way too quickly. Therefore, they've got to cut corners. And this is one thing which you see so much. Poor tradespeople back to the boots on the ground, getting all the blame and all the pressure and all the stress, and then the risk of not getting paid if you're lucky. But actually, you look at the smaller house builders, the family-run ones, the workforce were a lot happier, generally, from what I've seen. The quality of finished product is certainly infinitely higher. I think it's the big boys, the big multinational house builders that are doing absolutely obscene levels of work each year. It's got to start with them, because there's so many different fragments of the chain, from client all the way down to the final person that buys that house or flat and moves in. It's just a bloody mess. And the other thing I might as well get off my chest while I'm on my soapbox is people telling, not asking skilled plant operators, tradespeople, whatever profession you are, if you've got no experience in that field, don't tell someone what to do. Ask them, because you're only as good as the people around you. Doesn't matter what level they're at. If you're a skilled electrician or you operate diggers all day, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're good at that, the person above you should be feeding off your experience and knowledge, not telling you to do something which is impossible because they haven't got a clue apart from what they're being told by the tit at the top.
I got on that hand as well. Sorry, to your boys. Yeah, Mark. With that as well, the house building side of it, I come away from the railway world a little bit, the civil side of that. I thought there's a hell of a lot of housing going up. This was 5-6 years ago now, around my way, and I thought I'm going to get on this. This is perfect for me, on my doorstep, absolutely perfect. I walked in there, and the rail money wasn't what it was, but even for the ground workers and machine drivers that I was working alongside, the money they were offering was awful. And that's why we've literally had some, Andy, a few media publications come our way about a few things about house builders. I thought the money they're paying, but then our industry and us as construction workers are getting hammered for this stuff, but it's the money that's being paid. Unfortunately, if you pay that money, you're not going to get the staff at that level. And that's obviously why we're seeing such a huge problem with what these houses are looking like once they're finished.
But also, Steve, if you look at apprenticeship wage, who's going to come into our industry on £2.84 an hour? Now, I know apprentices that are working in the evenings, as in as many hours as they can do before they fall asleep, as courier drivers, as anything they can do just to try and make ends meet. Now, we've got a massive shortage of skills. We all know what happened with the EU workers. I don't give a shit what government say. I know for a fact they're not coming back. They got basically told to piss off. They've gone home. Their economies have picked up. They're working and they're with their families. They're not living in rubbish conditions over here, missing their loved ones. So what we've got to do is get youngsters coming in. Now, I'm like Steve. We're in the best industry in the world. Divvy bollocks here, came out of school with nothing, learnt a trade without an apprenticeship or going to college, and now I'm doing what I am broadcasting-wise. You can be a project manager. You can go and retrain as an architect. You've got all these amazing things, but offering someone at school £2.80 something when you can go and work in a coffee shop for 7 times that.
It's funny you say that. I've had quite a few young guys coming up to me and going, "Oh, I'm only on this per hour." My mate is bragging because he's working at McDonald's for £11 per hour, and they're both 17. And I always say, my answer to that is like I always say, in 5 years' time, you'll be a fully qualified ground worker or whatever trade you're doing. You'll be earning, if you're good and you take pride in it, in 5 years' time, your mate that's working in McDonald's will either still be there on £11.50 an hour, or he'll be starting from scratch again. I says, stick at it. I says, I know it's not a good wage, but stick at it, because in 5 years' time, you'll be above him. And then you've got your whole future ahead of you. You've got your skills. You can go in different directions. If your mate's working in McDonald's, what really skills is he taking in? Yeah, he's getting a good wage at the moment, but in 5 years' time, when you're, say, 21, you've got a career ahead of you. Where that guy there is probably maybe still working at McDonald's. Yeah, he was getting good money, but now you're getting even better money, and you've got a career now. And that's the way I approach young ones.
I do want to pick up on something that Andy just mentioned there about migrant workers. One of the issues that we see a lot is this idea of transient workers. You're working away from home, away from loved ones, away from your doctor, your dentist, your support network, and everything else. What about those migrant workers? I know a lot went home as a result of the Brexit vote, but we still have a lot here. They are stranded in a foreign country, speaking a language that is not their own, sometimes struggling to do so. They are going through exactly the same stresses and strains as the rest of the industry. And yet they have that additional burden that they're literally going back to digs. They can't speak to anyone in some cases. Is that being reflected in your travels, Andy, Steve?
Yeah, massive. I mean, the one big thing, I won't mention the site, but it's a very, very big, well-known groundwork and civils company. Mark, you know them well. And one thing from doing the talks that I was quite ignorant about it. You've not just got one or two foreign country people in, you've got probably 5, 6, 7, 8. So potentially you've got quite a lot of languages. Now, it's all very well saying, okay, well, we're all going to converse in English. Some of them can't. Their English isn't great. There's no point in saying, okay, well, we'll have a second language, basics of French. You've got so many different people from different backgrounds and different languages. They feel so isolated because they can't interact with their work colleagues. And while we're on the subject of accommodation, I think it's disgusting what some of these poor workers staying away from home and loved ones are put in to stay. It's, I wouldn't put this dog in his line next to me. But I do think the big thing with that is the isolation, because there's so many different languages and no one's pulling that together and offering some sort of assistance.
Like, say, your foreign workers that come over here and work, they live in not great accommodation. They're maybe on pennies, but a lot of people kind of slag them off. Oh, we're getting a so-and-so today. Oh, for fuck's sake. But by Christ, they bloody work. They will work harder than any other. They take pride in everything they do because they know their job's valuable. If they need their job and they want to keep their job. So everything they do, yeah, that foreigners will maybe only done 20 curbs. We've done 30 or 40. But I guarantee you that guy's curbs are bang on straight. They're all level. Whereas, yeah, maybe your UK guys have banged in 20 more curbs, but they'll be rough as anything. But the thing is, they maybe are rough, but they get away with it. Because of all that big major companies, it's all about push, time. Where, like you were saying, Andy, about small companies, they don't really have a deadline as much. So they take pride in everything they do because they know that they're just a small company. And to get more work, they need to do a good job on what they're doing. Whereas big companies, like for Barrett Homes and stuff like that, it's all about push, time. Oh, that'll do. Right, that's it done. The house is up. But I served at times at Bricky, so some of the houses I go and see, I'm just like, I can't believe that's getting handed over. I'm just like, what the hell's going on? I would love to go and buy a house because I would go, that's wrong. Because some of the houses that they move into that you see all over the UK, you're just like, really? They're accepting that as you've spent $250,000 on a house that is pretty rough, where if you get a small builder that it's hard the time to do the job right, that's the big difference with the small and the big companies. It's just.
But that's the difficult thing. Us trades get the blame for it. You read all the Sun, Mirror, and BBC Breakfast News. Oh, these builders have left this new building such a bad. Listen, we don't enjoy that. We want to finish it to the best of our ability that we were taught. But when you're under that enormous pressure,
I've got a
The
couple
thing
of questions.
with
I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. I've got a couple of
Sorry.
questions I do need to get to. This one, I think this is possibly controversial, but I do think it's an important point to make. Nigel Williams, evening Nigel, double-edged sword, the whole mental health issue. I speak from a position of experience. I've been suicidal at work, and I've also seen men who have played the mental health card to their advantage and to absolve themselves of responsibility. I do care, and I took on the role of a mental health first aider to help people. I realise this is a weird analogy to draw, but when I watch football these days, we have this new concussion rule, and every time there's a slight incident, somebody just needs to hold their head, and they get away with murder. Oh, I've been hit on the head, therefore the decision goes. Have we got to the point now where mental health has become a card that can be played?
I in the last 6 years, and this is, I know it's quite a thing where people say it can. In the last 6 years, I don't, in an industry that's predominantly self-employed, if you pull the mental health card, you're not getting paid. Simple as that. You're not in work, you don't get paid. Employed staff do, and I've heard this from main contractors, that they do believe that is people who are employed in kind of tier one contractor world, that you hear that card getting played, but the people on the ground can't afford to play the card. The last thing I done when I looked through my struggles, and that was say I need a day off. The best thing for my mental health was to carry on working. So I don't really see it as an excuse. The mental health first aid and all this kind of stuff and what we're out there doing, I think all of it is just there's a lot more danger in mental health first aid than there is someone playing the mental health card, if that kind of makes sense. But I've been there and I've had multiple phone calls from people because they've noticed, or I was told I was a mental health first aider. I strongly disagree with the course, and I won't change my mind on that one, just through my own experiences and the dangers it's put me in. But then the people actually playing the card, I've not, from the like say self-employed staff world, I've not seen it, and we speak to a lot of people.
Okay, well, that was one question. I knew that was going to be fairly controversial. This one, I think, is one that we could really chat about. This one comes from Danny Keeney. Does the panel have any thoughts on the high use of drugs and alcohol within the industry and its links to poor mental health? I know it was a major factor for me when I was at my lowest.
Right. Sorry
I know
to jump in, but I've got a very good answer for this from twofold. So first of all, when I had to stop playing rugby because of far too many surgeries and everything else, body screwed, that was my release. That was my escape. 80 minutes of doing what you want to your opposite number when rugby is a proper sport, not this cuddly rubbish these days. I then turned to booze. I then turned to soft drugs. I then turned to hard drugs. Because I looked at it, it was very much a short-term, escape, taking the pain away. Now, I'm working with a pharmaceutical company called Abbott Toxicology, which is a global firm, 100 and something thousand employees, doing a lot of work with them. And basically, it is now evidential through research, through statistics, that poor mental health is very strongly linked to people taking drugs and alcohol. And what they've asked me, not just through what I went through, but secondly, how do we avoid it? Because listen, someone comes in stinking of booze, or you can, stinking of the old green stuff in the morning, they get tested, they're out on their ears. How do you know what state that person's in? They might not see the end of the week. Now, I'm not saying keep them on, but what I'm saying is we need to, again, go back to the beginning. Why are they turning to that? Because I can vouch, it just makes things 100 times worse. Yes, Saturday night, you're flying off your tits, absolutely having the time of your life. Come Tuesday, you don't want to be around. It makes things worse. And there's other things which I wasn't aware of, simple things you can do, such as, obviously exercise, getting out in nature, eating healthy, taking up a hobby or sport. There's all these things you can do. But the automatic thing, because it's very, very easy to get booze and drugs. Very, very easy. And I think the big thing for me is educating people that isn't the best option. And if someone is caught, try and help them. Don't just kick them down the road, because that is not always the way to answer the question.
On there as well, Mark, one massive thing that was probably what took me into this world, and I think it's probably where me and Andy connect with the post-traumatic stress stuff, is I'm no scientist again, but just through studying and speaking to specialist people, our industry is riddled with people who have witnessed or come across at some stage in their life, on-site or off-site, childhood, a lot of the time, is trauma. Trauma is just not recognised as a hazard or risk anywhere. I was working on Crossrail for 5 years on the overhead area out in Essex, and there was fatalities every week on the track, and of which some we unfortunately witnessed. But it was never once asked of us to sit down for a day and speak to an actual professional, not a mental health first aid. I've done a day course, Jobby. It was a case of speaking with someone who knows psychiatry, knows what we've just seen, and knows how and where our brain's going to go. I speak with companies now that want people in front of them within 48 hours of risking being witnessing a trauma, because they know that first 48 hours is vital. So the person, it's the case of, no, I'm all right, don't worry about me. And that's what I did for many, many months. And my whole health for the next 5-6 years massively deteriorated. But we don't understand trauma in construction, and we haven't got any professionals. Military had massive, massive issues with trauma and PTSD. So they invested into it. This was 100 years ago. They invested into it. And yeah, it's been a long journey for them. And that's been very clear with a lot of the Middle East stuff going off over the last 15, 20 years. But they invested into finding out how and what they can do to help the military guys. We're in a worse state than the military are at the moment, and we haven't got any professional bodies in here getting on site, understanding it. I work with guys who only work night shifts because they can't sleep in the dark, because they sleep at dark. They smell things. They smell on that day that they witness something. They can't do it. And these guys are on our highways every night. There was 2 guys there on motorway projects that I met. There's guys who've worked in the Middle East. They walk back onto a building site. They get a job tomorrow. No one ever asks them, what have you witnessed? What have you seen? They live day in, day out with this trauma in their mind and trigger words going on around them all the time. There's so much this industry is negligent for, and I'm highly, highly passionate about it, because it burns my arse, as you say it. We do not care about people who witness trauma. We don't understand trauma. We don't know what to do with it. We've got multiple millions of pounds being thrown around. We've got corruption scandals, as we know from a lot of the press recently with yourselves. Well, Mark, you put out there. There's money being thrown around this whole subject, and not one professional body or organisation has said there is an issue with trauma in this industry. We witness it every day. It's not 1 in 4. It's not 2 in 5. Whatever ridiculous number you want to throw it, it's 100%. And guess what? The people who haven't witnessed it or felt it, one day they're going to get a phone call from people saying that someone's not here anymore, or something's happened. You've lost your dog, you've lost your cat, you've lost whatever. They're going to be smacked in the face with trauma. And if they don't know how to deal with it, they'll go down a dark way. They'll be a man. They'll hold it in. They'll turn into a recluse. They'll hit drugs. They'll walk onto the building site. They'll fail a DNA site, and you'll sack them for fucking failing your DNA site. And the industry just does not give a shit. And I'll take that to the very top as much as I need to, because it boils my blood to, you might have just witnessed that. You see where I'm coming from.
I'm going to come back to that in a second. There's a couple of really good comments in the chat. But one of the things that I've spoken to you previously about, Andy, and I think to Steve as well, the industry itself has been very, very slow to respond to this mental health crisis. But one area that hasn't been slow is charities. It seems like every time I turn on LinkedIn, there's a new charity addressing construction mental health. Is that actually helpful? Are they all pulling in the same direction? Is there not a danger that we get to the point where there's just so much talk about the subject that nothing's getting done, or that we end up with an industry that just goes, oh, Jesus, not mental health again?
I think rather than put in my personal views, which I've certainly got on that, I think we've got to look at facts and the truth. Now, the answer to your question, Mark, I'm sure people on here have heard of it. If not, go and have a look at it. Ford, which is obviously a massive organisation, I think it's the third of work vans are Fords. They came up with this concept called Make It Visible. Now, the whole concept was to have every single charity and support network sitting under this umbrella. So let's say, as Steve said, someone suffers at work, trauma-based, or an accident, or losing a friend, whatever it is. Maybe one charity can't help, so the next one might be able to, or another organisation, or another support network. But at the moment, and again, I'm only basing stuff on facts and the truth, Make It Visible, which is meant to be the umbrella for every single charity and support network to work under together, there is only one charity in that at the moment. And that charity is refusing to deal and speak with others. So you've kind of a bit of a dead end. A very good concept supported by a big brand with budget, is now unfortunately failing. Now, I'm not saying this because rumours, I'm saying this from other charities, and I've worked with and know a lot of them. If you're working together, but one person's kind of grabbed the bull by the horns and doing what they want to sort of say, hey, look at us, we're great, it's defeating the object. There's a lot of box ticking going on, a huge amount. I mean, not just charities, but you look at media owners, Mental Health Awareness Week, Suicide Awareness Week, big thing goes up on the social media platform or website or newspaper. Following week, it's gone. Well, clearly, that's what you think of it. You're ticking a box. You know, some of these courses we all know are a crock of shit. They make certain companies fortunes. And we all know there's millions being thrown at these courses to get people to do them. The big thing we have to do as an industry now is what that Make It Visible concept wanted to do, but isn't doing. We need to pull together, because it's all very well. We could have 600 charities all trying to do the same thing, but all pulling in different directions. We're never going to get anywhere. But if we all formed some sort of alliance group, body, whatever you want to call it, and work together under this umbrella with vast experience levels, even the four of us here, you know, what we could do together. So we've got to look at the reality. Great concept set up for all of us to join and work under together to solve this hideous problem. But one charity is doing their own thing, refusing to meet with others and push it forward. And actually, I guarantee the figures that from ONS, when they come out at the end of this year, it's going to be another rise. And people have got to start being held accountable for that. There's no way Steve and I can go into Parliament and be told by the CEO of a big charity, mental health awareness is a success. It's working really well. It ain't. Tell that to the 507 people that have lost someone.
I would like to know how many mental health first aiders there are in the UK, and then divide that by how many people have experience with mental health and know what to look for and know how it feels, and the people that haven't a clue and just did a couple of courses. That would be an interesting number to know.
It's such a dangerous world. I done the course 5-6 years ago when it first kind of started getting launched, because from my personal, as many people do, had personal experiences of it and wanted to understand it a bit more, really for myself, selfishly, and get my head around it. And within 6 weeks, my little boy was born. And I'm sitting there at 9 o'clock at night with a newborn on my stomach. I've had to hand him over because my phone's got off. Someone's rung me who's on the edge of a cliff, literally about to just cancel everything, and said to me, I need your help. And I said, and I now look back and I think it's probably what saved the guy's life that night. But I naively said that despite the situation you're in, mate, can you do me a favour? What's that? I went, how did you get my number? And I literally and I took him completely off this subject of why he's about to kill himself to, I saw a mate of mine gave me a number because he works on a site. You know, this guy had nothing to do with the project I was on. Someone didn't know how to deal with mental health, took my name off a sign on the thing and gave it to someone well outside our project. And I've heard horror stories with people like that down the road, of people now thinking they're suddenly counsellors or they're psychiatrists and things like this. We got, since the documentary went out, unfortunately, last year in October, we're well over 50. I'd one today, actually, again, someone's trying to sell us courses to give us cash back, basically, at the end of it. They're flogging it like a dead horse, literally. It's get courses sold. It ticks the box for these companies. We can earn, I can go and do a 6-day course, I think it is, become a mental health first aid England coach. And then that educates me. Now I can now go out and do 2-day courses with people and earn myself £2,500 every 2 days. So over £1,200 a day, literally just by selling. It's a cracking cash earner, no doubt about it. And it's scandalous. I never wanted to go. And as the founder of a charity, and as you say, is it right these charities are all popping up all over the place? I completely agree with you. I never wanted to go down the charity route. I only went down the charity route because I was ignored by the charities that are out there. I'll say it now. It's only the truth. But Mates in Mind told me they literally only want to deal with corporate to corporate in a way. So that was fine. And I get it now. They've got new staff and we're actually talking to them. I'll give them that fair play. But that was the reason why I went out and done it. And ever since, I kind of had my own spin. I want to do what's on my own. I don't want nothing to do with that corporate world. The charity sector is a horrible place. And as charity founder to another charity founder, many charity founders in this construction industry, we all admit it's not a nice place. It's worse than business because you're on each other's patch where it is free cash being thrown around things. It's a mad. I don't like it. I ask for people's support rather than their money a lot of the time. And that's what we want. But the thing with it is, I was approached by Gavin at Band of Builders, and I know Band of Builders. I've kept an eye on them since before I was interested in the subject of mental health, before they even touched on it. But I know they're just builders out there looking after builders, and that's what I have a lot of time for. And Gavin come to me in November and said, Steve, I want to bring us all charity founders together to have the main charities in the industry. And from then it stemmed on a bit. So he's got some big organisation leaders coming into the hold as well. We've got to wait till July because Bill Hill can't find himself available until July. That's 7-8 months or whatever it is since November. We're all of us said, yeah, we're ready. We're ready to come down, sit down. We've done it over emails. And then we've just been told it's now going to happen towards the end of July because Bill Hill's found a space in his diary. So as soon as it suits Bill Hill to sit down and chat, then maybe these lives and these people who's killing themselves, things might actually stop. But until then, we'll actually hopefully he can free his diary up because he's obviously a very busy boy. He's got a lot of golf to play.
Powerful. I'm going to quickly move on to this because although I think that somebody's got their names wrong, Plantworx has given a stand to Andy's Man Club. I don't know Andy's Man Club, but I'm keen to find out more. Mental health is such a massive issue. Maybe you guys can arrange a meet-up on one of the days and get everyone together. Let's talk, get a support group going. How about that, Mark? Well, I have no idea who Gary and Al are. I know who Steve is, and it's not Gary that's wearing a hat. So, yes, Plantworx, guys, if you're free, maybe we should start a support work network. And
Mark,
also,
sorry, Mark, just on that Andy's Man's Club, I've done a bit where they've just spoke to them recently in the past. They're fantastic. They started up as a voluntary kind of community thing, and they've got loads around the country of just decent blokes in a room overnight having a cup of tea. And yeah, look at the story behind them and where they've gone to. Yeah, fair play to Plantworx to get them involved.
And Plantworx have also got national health workers visiting each day. We can arrange an audience with them. They need to know what's happening. That would be a good starting point as well. Now, there was a few bits and pieces I wanted to pick up on. Going back to the drugs and alcohol, Gary Muirhead. I was on hire to a company that had been told by the client they were going to do a drugs and alcohol test. They said, if you do that, you may as well shut the site as no one would pass. It never happened. I think I've heard that story before. Jim Turner, evening, Jim. Recreational drinking and drug taking is escapism from people's problems. We need regular random drink and drug tests at work, and if someone doesn't pass, they should be suspended until they've seen a trained medical professional about it. I find that people I work with have hobbies outside of work, don't tend to be caning at the weekend evenings, therefore seem to have better mental health. I know, Andy, I know you're a big advocate for walking the dog. Totally agree with that.
Listen, Miss Rugby, I was very lucky to play around the world at a reasonable level, and it was such a good escape. When you've had a shit week, you've got 80 minutes basically to go and slaughter somebody. Often I got it back twice as bad as I gave it out. But when I could stop playing that, there was a big gulf. There was a huge gulf because I didn't have that release. That's why I turned to the booze and then the drugs. But now, the pleasure I get from walking this mad animal sitting next to me, oh yes, you, in the most beautiful surroundings. It could be on a beach, it could be in the woods, it could be at the park. It's just mesmerizing. The woods I go to, I barely see anybody. It's magical, and all I hear are noises in nature, and it is just such an escape. And I always go there if I've had a rough few days, and it's like, I call it my happy place. Go there, few hours, this mad thing runs around like a lunatic chasing rabbits and deer, and then come back and it's so much better. And I think, we need to, as that comment, I can't remember who it was, apologies, he said that we need to basically, if someone is caught under the influence, to go and get them help, which is a brilliant solution. Don't just kick them up the high street without any pay. You don't know what they're going to end up doing. I think that was a really good point. Get them that help.
Interestingly, Nick Drew has just come on. For those of you that don't know, Nick was a former ice hockey player to a very high standard, and he says exactly the same. I can relate to that sporting golf after the career is over. Also going to bring back Danny Kearney. At risk of incurring the wrath of the panel, I'm a mental health first aider trainer. I won't go into how I give back to non-corporates, as that's not the point, but I've experienced a lot of mental health and ex-military, and and there is more to that, I have had a very positive response to the feedback. Lots of people that have a greater confidence to start a chat. It depends on the trainers and their experience. I think that's a key point. I don't think anyone's trying to write off the whole of the mental health first aider brigade, because there are some people like Danny who come to it from the right place. Let's have a look. Lou Carney says, ditto, 3 hounds on the beach from 5 to 6, 45 every night, my happy place. Would have stayed longer, but this chat was way too important. Thanks, Lou. Yeah, I think we've largely tucked ourselves into a bit of a back alley now. But let me go round, and I'm going to start with you, Andy, because you're top left. If I made you king of construction for the day, and your first task was to sort out the mental health issue, how do you do it? What do you do? What do you do to make an instant improvement?
I hate being top left, because that means them still get time to think about it.
I'm just waiting for what Andy says.
They're just going to say, I agree.
Jesus, listen, we all know it's not something that can happen overnight. There's lots of different ways. I'm not going to sit on the fence. First of all, we need to be regulated, because any Tom, Dick and Harry can walk in and say they're good at doing something when they've never held a trowel or driven any machinery. We've got to be regulated, and I think we've got to have a lot stronger work ethic with actually looking after people. And the other thing for me is we need to educate. So when people do deteriorate, when their mental health gets worse, for work-related or home-related or whatever it is, they know the right paths to take, the right numbers to call, the right help to get. Because I keep saying, leaving it until that last minute is too late. It's far too late. If we educate, not just people in the industry, and we'll know that us older lot, it's harder to get through to than the younger generation. But if we can get that education process to help people for their future battles, because we're all going to have them, then I think we'll have a lot better options and solutions rather than people just hitting booze and drugs and then doing something silly.
Right, top right, Steve. Andy has just abdicated to go and spend some time in his happy place with his dog. You're king of the construction for a day. How do you fix mental health in the industry?
I would personally get guys to speak to one another. Just say, look, how would I put this? I would offer more. I don't even know how to word it. If your guys are out on site and doing a job, if they did a good job, tell them that they did a good job. There's not enough appreciation for what workers do. It's always what you do wrong. I think, me personally, I would be going up to your fellow workers or whoever and going, God's sake, guys, you've done a tidy job there. Make them feel appreciated, make them feel wanted, and make them feel that what the work they do is good work. And I think that uplifts everybody. If you're just getting constant, oh, that's wrong, and you do a tidy job, but it doesn't get recognised. And if you do that every second day, then you will get down, and then work gets rough, it gets shoddy, there's no appreciation about anything, and then that's where guys start swearing, start throwing stuff, start feeling down. There needs to be more positive in construction and less of it nagging with what you do wrong. That's what I would like to change.
So, bottom left, Steve, you're king of construction for the day. Congratulations on the appointment. What do you do?
First thing at my coronation, I wouldn't invite Prince Andrew. That never helped PR. So I had to say it.
Evening, mate. Well done.
It's not good for PR at any level. And secondly, I would make suicide a riddle. As we're saying, I think it's a tough subject, but there's a professional people, like I say, way above my pay grade with lots more letters after their name that understand that if you investigate, I know it's a personal subject to many families, but from the families that I know and I have spoken to over the past, they want answers. And if that means there has to be some kind of investigation, not too intrusive on the family, but more on the working conditions and the personal conditions of that person, that everybody wants answers to what is killing these people. So, yeah, I'll stick by it. The suicide must become a riddle. And Prince Andrew.
Well, I do have one final question now that Steve's well and truly kissed goodbye to his knighthood. Andy and Steve, you're both young guys. You're out there in the world, and you're as Steve has just said. I know both of you have dealt with families of bereaved families of suicide victims. How do you deal with that personally? How do you go home at the end of the day and process that? Because I've encountered suicide twice in my life. I won't bore you with the details, but I've encountered it twice in my life. You are, I wouldn't say you're actively seeking it out, but you are rubbing shoulders with it on a daily basis. How do you deal with that personally?
We all react to things differently. It's very hard not to bring something home when you've heard that, or sat opposite someone who's told you something. You're like, Jesus. It's going back to what you do to escape. If it's a personal thing or something you've been told or something you've just witnessed. And it goes back to, going out into nature with the dog, or taking up a sport or hobby, or doing something like that. And I think the key thing is, my other half keeps telling me this: you can't save everybody. And, if it's not down to you, it's not your fault. And if you've been able to say something or help in some way, that's a positive. And I think, you can't take it on your own shoulders you've failed, because ultimately it's probably not down to you.
Yeah, I'm with
Steve?
Andy on that. I think that's the main thing that we do, because there is no one to blame. The person who has made that action is not there to be blamed. It's you blame yourselves, and we see that a lot. And there's people out there, and there was argument on some comments on our feed on LinkedIn the other day about all suicide is preventable, and it is massively offensive, really, people saying that, and people do, because it is a tough place. But I personally, and that's probably why we use sport, and I always say it's selfish on my own behalf, because I'm not a big talker on it in terms of personal. I can go and talk about my story on site once a day. I've done it 2 or 3 times a day, and it wasn't healthy for me. But I use sport as my conduit, I always will, and that's just even walking. Like, as Andy said, going out there and walking the dog. I don't have a dog, but go out there walking. We do a lot of walks, getting out there, embracing it. People say go home and talk about things. If I went home and told my missus the stuff I do in the daytime, she wouldn't sleep, and the kids would never be as looked after as they are. So it's not a case of go home and offload the stuff we hear. It's not like an everyday job, but it's finding your outlet. It's what works for you. Sport works for me. Not normally any kind of involvement with sport or just being part of it, but at the same time, hobbies and interests. What are your hobbies and interests? Look at what you do and what you find entertaining and you enjoy, and just make sure use that as your outlet. Like I always say tiddlywinks or knitting. I don't care what it is. Just find time to do that, because it shuts your mind off, and that little bit of mind shut is what clears the head, I believe. So, yeah, we've had times when I've had to, even recently, little things where you just go, I just need a bit of time. I literally said it on Friday at an event we were on. The guy I know quite closely, I went, I've had it up to my eyeballs this week. And he's looked at me and went, want a hug? And I went, yeah, go on then. They took it. But to me, he knew I don't say that much, but he knew then. He went, yeah, okay, got you. And then, banter was aside, and he gave me a squeeze. I thought, yeah, that'd do a bit of man love, why not? But no, you embrace it, and embrace the good outdoors is a winner.
Just while you were talking there about some of the things that you've seen and some of the things that you've heard, is there an argument for us being more graphic in our depiction and coverage of suicide? I got into a bit of an online spat with somebody who was talking about the term committing suicide. They had an issue with the term committing suicide because that was supposedly putting the blame on the person that committed suicide. I don't want to get drawn into semantics here. To my mind, I think there's a lot of pussyfooting goes on around the subject of mental health, and we all tend to tread very carefully. Is there an argument for actually? I'm not saying that we should be showing dead bodies online and things like that, but being a bit more. I mean, we all live and operate in a very, very blunt industry. Some of the stuff that you've heard. I mean, I remember you recounting a story, Steve, about a guy that cut his own throat on a site. I just blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind that somebody must have been that desperate. Is that the sort of conversation we should be having, rather than worrying about semantics and charities and first aid courses and that kind of thing?
Mark, it's exactly that. We've painted this world of suicide as just figures and numbers. I'm all for it. We're at the point now of it's getting worse and worse and worse. People need to be hearing this. And we've heard some horrific stuff. We've seen horrific stuff, and it's not pretty. But I always go back to I'll just sit back and go home and watch that on Netflix, and it's a lot worse than what I'm watching on TV in comparison. In a way, yeah, it's only a film. I get that. But the stuff on TV, the media's throwing stuff in front of us day in, day out that we don't want to see. What's horrific. What's happening needs to be shown, and not as in to the eye as such, but the stories need to be told. We need to realise that these 507 people who take their own lives, they're not just slipping away at night. These people are doing things. They're putting themselves in front of trains. They're jumping in front of lorries. They're jumping off buildings. They're throwing X amount of drugs down their face, down their necks, and doing what they're doing. This is the severity of it. It's not a tick box that's potentially to help these numbers. Let's invest a bit of money to help people. People are walking out of their houses with their kids at home and saying they're all better off without me, and they're throwing themselves in front of things. And it's not. And the cancelled and committed thing, I'm a fully committed man to what I'm doing. I fully commit to making sure that construction sport's going to work, and we do it for the people we do it. I'm committed to that, and I don't care what anyone says. I'm committed to doing what's right for me and my family. I'm not saying that because it's a negative word or a legal word or a word that should be frowned upon. If someone commits to something to me, it's because they fully believe and it's the right decision. It's not. It's you're going down the council culture, and I don't believe a council culture is healthy in any environment, let alone this one.
Mark, if you remember the drink driving TV campaign a few years ago, the ads, if you remember, got pretty bloody graphic. When you remember, yeah. I think there was a young girl that went through. Obviously, it was all acted, but there was a young girl that went through the windscreen because her parent, I can't remember, mother or father, had been drinking. Now, a lot of people still talk about that today. Now, apparently, I'm not an expert in that, but apparently the drink driving numbers did drop significantly after these hard-hitting ads. So again, look at facts and numbers. If something as hard-hitting as that, I remember watching it because it was Christmas time, they usually put it on. I remember thinking, Jesus, that's a bit much. But if it worked, then maybe we should. I'm more than, from a personal point of view, I'll go as graphic as I need to. It's going to help someone.
Sorry, Steve. I'm going to give away my viewing habits now. But I know when they do the Great British Bake Off, the charity version where they get celebrities baking cakes and stuff, they have because it is for Stand Up to Cancer. They always have like an interlude with people talking about the fact that they've been diagnosed with cancer, and you're watching it thinking she seems really nice. I hope she makes it, and then it gets to the end and turns out she didn't. You're going to put your hand in your pocket to support Stand Up to Cancer as a result of that. I'm not saying I don't want to be parading bereaved families on TV and that kind of thing, but if that's what it takes to get the industry to take note, hey, sign me up. I'll put it on my show, no trouble at all.
Humans react to emotion. Yeah, sorry, there you go.
When someone takes their life or have tried to, I've heard a lot of people go, "Oh, what a selfish person." And I think that person is thinking that their partner or friends are better off without them, or that person that has took their own life has came to that stage because he feels that I'd be better off not being here. I'm just a hassle. I'm just a inconvenience, or my family would be better off without me because I can't give them the money they need to pay the bills and things like that. It's not selfish. It's an illness. It's something that you can't stop doing. I've always thought when I nearly took my life, I took a lot of pills, like loads of them, and it took a split second after I did it, sitting in my car in a lay-by on my own, and I was nearly falling asleep, and then I just kind of woke up, made myself be sick because a switch just turned on, thinking, "What the hell am I doing?" And before that happened, you're not thinking about anything. You're just thinking, "I don't want to be here anymore." And to get to that stage, then there should have been someone way before it comes to that asking, "Are you okay?" or your work colleagues coming up to you. And that's that's what it all comes down to. It starts off with you having a bad day, and you're working with someone, they're ignoring you, they're not bothered. Oh, man up. And that person, it isn't going to go and take his life maybe a week later. It could go on for months and months, maybe a year. And if that person on that site or any construction environment, if one person went up to that guy and goes, "Are you all right?" that person might have been still here today because he might have thought, well, somebody actually does give a fuck. If you know what I mean, it's
not just it's the feeling people would be better off if I wasn't here. I think it's also my thing. I just wanted to end the pain, and I've had 14 operations through rugby, 90 something stitches in my face, meningitis, the bends. I've had the lot. Roll that all into one physical pain. I'd have that tomorrow morning over the pain of bad mental health, because it's constant. When I had my cheekbone and eye socket smashed and I had to put it all back together again, the pain afterwards. But you get through physical pain. It's strange, because the next day it's a bit better. Mental health, it's permanently there, it's permanently there, it's permanently there. And when you turn to something, if it's booze or drugs, and after a while that doesn't numb the pain, that's when you go, I just need this pain to go. And that when someone says you're selfish, that's because they've got no experience of that position. I just wanted pain to go.
But like you're saying about, like, you get an injury, it heals after maybe a couple of days. The thing with mental health, it's there's no quick fix at all. It just takes as long as it takes, and you've got to be patient with it. And your friends and family have got to support you throughout that. I know it must be hard for them.
Yeah, that's the key thing. It does take time. And also what you said earlier about these damn pills that you're thrown on the minute you walk in at the doctor's, that does work for some people, but I've been just over 8 years. I'm desperately trying to kick them now, because long term has had effects, 100%. But coming off them, you then look at doing something else. So, I mean, look at, you can't see, I'm quite a big bloke, and if you said to me, go and start looking at holistic treatment for mental health, I'd be like, shut up. What am I going to do? Sit on a rug cross-legged, barking at the moon? But what I did do with things like emotional freedom technique and Kundalini activation process, all that, it worked. And that is the thing. We're all different, and we all will react to different forms of treatment. It might take some people months. It could take some people years. But I think it's you can't call someone selfish. Some people just want that pain to end. And until you've been there, and, I always say one thing, I didn't do a proper job because I've got 2 people upstairs out of my life. And the weird thing was, and I've never said this to anyone, when I woke up in A&E, when the ambulance got me, they said, have you taken any booze or drugs? And I said, no, I haven't. They did bloods, and it proved that I had nothing in my system. And I said, I need to know one answer. Why don't I remember anything? And they said, we can tell you based on similar situations, when you get to that point, if it's a trigger, if it's a knife, if it's in front of a train, sometimes your body completely shuts down to stop you doing it. And that it basically blacks out. And that I found fascinating, that you get to that stage with no influence of funny drugs or loads of booze or pills, but your body just goes boom to stop you actually doing it properly. I found
it's the thinking before. When I worked offshore, it was thinking, if I jump in this water, right, it's going to be cold, right, it's not going to be quick, right. If I jump from 100 foot, it's just going to be over like that, and that's it, gone. Everything's stress free. Everything's just gone, and I'm thinking that's what I need to do. And then if it wasn't for my friends offshore, I maybe wouldn't be here today. I don't know, but it's when you start thinking, and then you're starting thinking, right, how can I do this? That's when you need to go and speak to someone.
That's exactly it. I mean, I research it. I mean, Steve knows, I'm trying to get a dash cam because I've just had the car done and the van done and all the rest of it. And so I'm research, get the best deal and all the rest of it. So I researched it, and I can tell you the quickest, most successful and least painful way to do it is an overdose of heroin straight to your stomach lining. Now, as you just said there, Steve, when someone gets to that stage, they need to have an outlet of somebody, a group, a number, a tech service, whatever. That's when they need to know something is there, because when you start getting into that realm, as you know, mate, it can often be too late.
Yeah. And that's what I run a lot of social media groups, and all I want to say, if anyone's struggling with anything, just send me a message. Give me a phone, whether it's on Instagram, Messenger, TikTok, Facebook. Just give me a text. I've been there. I know how it feels. If anyone, like any of my friends or anyone that I don't know, just want to maybe just, well, I'll just text Steve. I'm feeling a bit crappy today. I'll text him, see how he's getting on. How did he get into the demo drive? And how did he get into this? How did he get in that? And it takes your mind off things. So anyone that wants to just unload their mind, just give me a message. My door's always open.
I tell you one thing, the reason we will beat this is because there are people like us on here that are so passionate and driven, they will not give up until positive change put in place, which will get these numbers down. That's why I'm optimistic about the future.
I think that's a good point upon which to draw a line under this. We have been going for an hour and a half. I was expecting an hour, but I think it was all very, very worthwhile. Guys, listen, I really do appreciate you being here. Steve, you've just mentioned the fact that you've got lots of Facebook groups. Easiest way to find you online if somebody does need to reach out to you?
Facebook, Steve Williamson.
Nice and easy. Andy, best place to find you?
Yeah, Instagram probably at Andy Stevens TV. I think it's like, look, when we've been there, when you got a passion about something, I do get some very strange messages, some people that want out. And do you know what? The best thing, when you help someone and do something good, it makes you feel better. So rather than having a row with someone in the supermarket because they cut you up their trolley or, whatever it is, actually be nice to someone, because I tell you one thing, being nice to someone makes you feel better rather than being a knob. So I think if we can all take a little bit more time and effort to be a little bit more pleasant to people, it will make a big difference.
And I think the biggest thing...
You were looking at me when you said, don't be a knob, weren't you? I can tell.
The biggest thing I want to say is thanks to Diggers and Dozers and to yourself, Mark, for doing this, because I have never, ever thought that I would be able to go and speak about it and let people know my experiences. Like I say, they all think that, I've got a great life, but it was tough. It's been hard work. And I just want to thank you, Mark, for setting this up and giving me the opportunity to speak.
Well, thank you, Steve. I mean, I must admit, I didn't know a huge amount about your backstory before you came on. But
I've got some stories.
We'll get to that some other time, I think. But really appreciate you being here to share that. And Steve, where is best to find you online these days?
We're trying to be on all social media platforms. We realise that the construction world, when they're not on the tools or stuff, a lot of people are on their phones embracing it. So yeah, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We're pushing a bit harder this year to get the followings up. But yeah, Construction Sport on all social media channels. We're on all of them now. So yeah, Finley, and likewise to the boys, a massive thank you to yourself, Mark, to Andy, who's always supporting. Pleasure to meet Steve, and thank the Plantworx. For the opportunity to be part of it. Really, it's this stuff what makes the difference, I believe.
Well, I think the best way to sign off is from Lucani at Plantworx. Fantastic, guys. Thank you for your honesty and for sharing. Wow. Anything we can do for you all at Plantworx, let me know.
Can she move the date a week later?
Probably not.
So I could come back and go to it.
Maybe not.
The least they can do.
Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you being here tonight. And apparently, no, they can't move the show. It's worth a try, wasn't it? Guys, go and spend your evening. I'm sure if you're anything like me, you're probably starving to death right about now. Go and have a fantastic evening. Really appreciate you being here. I'll be back here again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the Breakfast Show. We'll be doing more of this kind of thing in the future, hopefully on a more cheery subject next time. And hopefully it'd be nice to come back in a year's time to say, actually, we've got the figures on the way down. So fingers crossed on that, guys. But thanks once again to Andy, to Steve, and to Steve. We've been overrun by Steves tonight. Have a good evening, you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks,
bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Up,
Cheers.
Steve.
Bye.
And we're done. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for watching. Humbled, says Lucani. Thank you. Well done all, says Dan Cullen. Thank you very much indeed. A problem shared is a problem halved. And if more folk thought that way, then suicide numbers would be lower. Yeah, absolutely right. Hopefully this has inspired a few people. If you know anybody that is struggling, I realise the idea of watching an hour and a half of this is probably not the sort of thing you want to show to somebody with poor mental health. But if you think one of your friends or colleagues is actually struggling, then please share this with them, let them see it, and let them know they're not alone. Until tomorrow, everybody, have a fantastic evening. Really appreciate your help, and thanks once again to Plantworx for making all of this possible. I'll see you all very, very soon indeed. Cheers.